Tiling window managers. Today's video will be a comprehensive guide to tiling window managers. So those of you that are new to Linux and new to concepts like window managers and especially tiling window managers, today we're going to start from the beginning. I'm going to define a few terms, and then I'm going to go a little more in depth about tiling window managers. We're going to define a few terms. We're also going to tell you about the pros and the cons of using tiling window managers, and then I'm going to compare and contrast 7 different tiling window managers later in this video. I'm going to compare DWM, Awesome, Qtile, Xmonad, i3, Urbs, WM, and BSPWM. Show you those 7 very popular tiling window managers. That way you guys that are interested in trying tiling window managers, you get to see 7 different ones in action. You get to see how they kind of operate, and you might find one that's the right fit for you. But first, let's define some things. What exactly is a tiling window manager? Well, let's start from the beginning. What is a window manager in general? A window manager is the frame around your windows. So when you open a program and it appears on the screen, there's a border around that window. That's the window manager. That is the thing that determines where that window is placed on the screen at that particular size. That's the window manager. Now, your typical desktop environments, such as in Windows or Mac OS, or in Linux if you're used to desktop environments like GNOME, KDE, XFCE, they all have what we call floating window managers, or sometimes people call them stacking window managers, where the windows float, meaning I can grab the mouse and I can drag the windows across the screen and they just float across the screen. They can overlap each other, they can sit on top of each other, they can stack on each other. That's why some people call it stacking window managers. I typically call them floating window managers. That's your traditional paradigm there. Now, a tiling window manager does things completely differently. So a tiling window manager is a window manager that automatically tiles the windows into mutually non-overlapping frames. So this is quite different than your traditional floating or stacking window managers. So to see this in action, what I'm talking about, the windows never overlap. Every window is always seen. So if I open a terminal here in Qtile today, so when I open one window, in this case, I opened a terminal window, it takes up the full screen, right? It takes up 100% of the screen real estate. Nothing is wasted. So there's no extra space that's not being used. It takes up the whole screen. Now what happens if I open up a second window? Again, I'll open another terminal emulator. It takes up 50% of the screen, and the previous window is taking up 50% of the screen. You see, they're not overlapping on each other. They're not stacking on top of each other. Both are 100% viewable to the user. If I open up yet another terminal window, you can see it opens 50% of that right-hand pane, and then I could open another one, and I could keep opening windows. They never overlap. That is a tiling window manager. Now, tiling window managers differ quite a bit from your full desktop environments, your traditional desktop environments, things like in Linux, GNOME, KDE, XFCE, or even the desktop environments in Windows and Mac. So what is a desktop environment? Well, a desktop environment is a window manager. Every desktop environment has a window manager. It's the thing that places the windows on the screen, determines their placement, determines their size. Every desktop environment has a window manager. The thing with a desktop environment is it's a window manager plus a whole bunch of other stuff, where a window manager is just a window manager. When we talk about window managers, we're talking about window manager only. It doesn't come with, well, it may or may not come with things like panels, a menu system, a notification system, a clipboard manager, network manager, background processes, a bunch of background daemons. It may not come with its own login manager, where big desktop environments like GNOME and KDE have everything and the kitchen sink thrown in and tightly integrated into their desktop environments. A window manager, though, when you go window manager, it's just the window manager. If you want a panel, you're probably going to have to install some third-party panel. If you want notifications, you're going to have to install some kind of notification system. Now, why would you choose to run a tiling window manager over a floating or a stacking window manager? Well, there are some advantages. First of all, none of your windows are ever hidden when you're in tiling mode. You always know exactly which programs you have open because they're all on the screen. None of them are stacked on top of each other. That is a definite advantage. Also, there's no wasted screen real estate. What do I mean by wasted screen real estate? Well, let me show you something in floating mode here. So this window right here is floating. You see all the wallpaper that you can see? By not having this at 100%, I'm wasting a lot of my desktop. Now, if I open a terminal again, let me open a terminal. So I'm going to open a terminal. You see this is in tiling mode. It takes up 100% of the screen. I don't see any of my wallpaper. This is very efficient. This is efficient use of screen real estate. No matter how many windows I open, you know, I'm not wasting space. Where in your traditional desktop environments that use floating or stacking window managers, there's a ton of wasted space. Also, one of the advantages of tiling window managers are how they handle workspaces, virtual workspaces, and multi-monitor support. Multi-monitor support with tiling window managers is fantastic. As a matter of fact, if you are on a multi-head system, meaning you run more than one monitor, you really should consider tiling window managers. They make using multiple monitors, especially once you get 3 or more monitors, just incredibly efficient. Also, those of you that are very keyboard-centric users, tiling window managers are pretty much 100% keyboard-driven. You can do everything from the keyboard. So if you don't like using the mouse, or you typically have your hands on the keyboard anyway, you spend all day typing or programming, you spend all your time in a terminal or a text editor, a tiling window manager is probably right up your alley. Also, by going window manager only, whether it be a tiling window manager or a floating window manager, you don't have a lot of extra programs that you don't need installed on the system. Because a tiling window manager is not going to give you all that extra stuff, the extra panel and menu and network manager and notification system and all that stuff. You choose the components you want to add to the tiling window manager to make your own desktop environment, if you will. So your tiling window managers are typically lighter and faster than your traditional desktop environment. So this leads us to the next question: which tiling window manager should I use? Well, a lot of this is going to be down to personal choice, but I'm going to show you 7 different tiling window managers here in a little bit. I will tell you what determines the right one for you. Some are harder to use out of the box than others. By harder, I mean some are more minimal than others out of the box. Some are extremely minimal, meaning they come with nothing. When I say they're just a window manager, I mean that. They are just a window manager. You log in, you have a black screen. You don't have wallpaper, you don't have a panel, you don't even have any kind of menus. Those are kind of tough for a new to tiling window managers user. So some are harder to use than others, so that will play into this. Also, if you have knowledge of a particular programming language, that helps, because of the 7 window managers I'm going to show you later, they're all written in different programming languages. They're all configured in different programming languages. So if you have knowledge of Python, for example, Qtile will be a breeze for you. If you know Lua, the awesome window manager, is probably going to be just right for you. If you know Haskell, Xmonads, probably what you want to be on. If you're a C programmer, DWM, you're going to love it. So a lot of this depends on what you know as far as the particular programming languages that these window managers are written in. You have lots of choices, but again, the decision is ultimately one of preference. So we need to start talking a little bit about the differences between the various tiling window managers. Probably the biggest difference is whether they're list-based tiling window managers or tree-based tiling window managers. Basically, how they determine the order of the windows as they're placed on the screen. So list-based tiling window managers, every window represents a number in an ordered list. So the first window you open is number 1, the second window is number 2, third window is number 3, etc. They're in an ordered list. The number of that window determines where it's placed on the screen. So if I go back to Qtile for a second, I'm going to open up a window. So that's window number 1. If I open up the second window, I already know where the second window is going to be placed. Qtile's already determined it. It's always going to be taking up 50% of the screen, the right-hand side of the screen. I already know that's going to happen. I already know that window number 3 is going to take up half of that right-hand column, and I already know that window number 4 is going to take up a third of that right-hand column. You see how this is going. So that is an ordered list. That is a list-based tiling window manager. So it's all about predetermined layouts, right? You never have to guess where the window's going to appear. You never have to figure out where the window's going to appear yourself. It's all predetermined, pre-built layouts. It's easy to change layouts too. Most of these pre-built layout kind of tiling window managers have 3 or 4 pre-built layouts that they ship with, and you can switch between them. For example, if I go back to Qtile, I am in a kind of a master and stack layout. We'll talk about this later, but this is this layout. Now I could change the layout as if I close all these windows, and instead of this master and stack layout, I could go to something like a max screen layout, which is, show me a window full screen. And if I open a second one, the second one is full screen as well. It's actually on top of the first one. So let me launch HTOP so you can see the difference between these two windows. So this is the second window, and the first window, well, it's still there. It's just behind the second one. You see, I can switch between them, but that is the full or a max screen layout. So you can change the layouts in these list-based tiling window managers rather easily. You can change them with key combinations. So list-based tiling window managers, they're kind of easy to figure out as far as you can kind of comprehend exactly the order of the windows. Tree-based tiling window managers, this is a little more complicated to explain. What is tree-based? Tree-based is where the windows represent leaves of a tree. So let me show you this in action. This is Herbstluft WM. Herbstluft is a tree-based tiling window manager. So let me first show you what we're talking about with tree-based. So here is a good diagram here. This is actually from the BSPWM documentation, which is also a tree-based tiling window manager. Think of the windows as having 2 possibilities every time you open a new window. So that's kind of complicated. Let me actually show you this in action. So if I get to a new screen and I open up window 1. Now, window 1 has 2 possibilities for the next window. I can either open a window taking up half the screen underneath it. I can do that. I had to manually decide to do that, by the way. Or I could also go ahead and decide to split it in this orientation and open the next window. So I had 2 possibilities there, right? So that's how the tree could split. And then this window, I also have those same 2 possibilities. If I wanted to, I could split this way and open a window there, or remove that, or I could split it in this direction, right? You see how you manually decide where every window is going to be placed. Is it going to be placed at the bottom of the current window, or is it going to be placed at the right of the current window? That is how this tree-based system works with these tree-based tiling window managers. The list-based versus tree-based. List-based is actually a little easier as far as, conceptually, you can kind of figure out where the windows are always going to be because of those predetermined layouts. Tree-based is a little more complicated, but with that complexity, there's more flexibility with tree-based window managers rather than list-based, because you don't have predetermined layouts, right? You determine where the windows are going to be on the screen on the fly. You determine whether that window's going to be tiled vertically or horizontally, or whichever direction you want to put it in. You put the windows where you want them. It does require more keystrokes because you have to decide, okay, place this window at the bottom, then open the program you want to open. So it's twice as many commands doing it that way. But again, it does allow you a little bit more flexibility. It can be complicated to modify the layouts in these tree-based tiling window managers, a little more complicated anyway than modifying layouts in list-based, so that is one thing to consider. Another common definition we use when we talk about these tiling window managers, we talked about list-based versus tree-based. Some people also talk about dynamic tilers versus manual tilers. When we say dynamic tiling window managers, we're talking about those tiling window managers that decide how big the windows will be, the size, and the placement on the screen automatically based on a few simple rules that you probably put in the config file. Those are dynamic tilers. When we talk about manual tilers, the user has to decide the placement and the size of the windows. So when I was in Herbstluft a minute ago, that's a manual tiler because I had to figure out where I wanted the windows and what size, what placement. A dynamic tiler would be more like Qtile earlier in the video, where I just hit the key combination to open up a window and it automatically just throws that window where it wants because I've already set up a config file telling it this is where I always want these new windows to open. That's dynamic versus manual. Another definition some people use when they talk about dynamic window managers is a window manager that can dynamically switch between tiling or floating modes. Some people call those dynamic window managers as well. I don't usually use that definition. When I'm talking about dynamic tilers, I'm talking about the ones that automatically draw the windows on the screen where they need to be. I don't refer to dynamic window managers as that window manager that can switch between tiling and floating. Almost every window manager, certainly all the ones we're going to talk about today, fit that definition of dynamic. They all have a tiling mode, they all have a floating mode, so I just wanted to throw that out there because you will hear some people use that term, dynamic window manager, using that definition. So let's talk about some of the predetermined layouts for many tiling window managers out there. Many of them share very similar pre-built layouts. Now, those pre-built layouts, although they're very similar, they can vary as far as the naming scheme. So let me quickly go back to, this is Qtile again. So probably the most common, most popular pre-built tiling layout is what is referred to as the master and stack layout. It's my personal favorite, and it's the default layout in Qtile, DWM, Xmonad. Again, it's probably the most popular tiling layout. Master and stack refers to the fact that you have one master window. So the first window would be the master window. Let me get into master and stack mode. I was in full screen mode there. So this is the master window. The next window starts the stack on the right hand side. So that right hand side is where the rest of the windows will stack. That is why it's referred to as a master and stack mode. Now, the next layout, it's a very common layout, is what I'm going to call a grid layout. This is very straightforward, where all your windows are basically tiled in a grid. For example, like a 2x2 grid or a 3x3 grid, depending on how many windows you open. However many windows you open determines the size of the grid. So if I open a window here, and then open another window, and then another window, and then one more, you see I'm no longer in the master and stack layout. This is more of a traditional kind of grid layout. The next very popular tiling layout, almost all of them have what they call either a monocle mode or a full screen mode or a max mode. Qtile calls it a max mode. Xmonad calls it a monocle mode. Some others call it a full screen mode, where your windows are full screen. They're 100% of the screen. I still have those 4 windows open, by the way. So again, if I open HTOP here, I've got HTOP, but if I cycle through the window stack here, I've got windows behind it, and keep cycling, I'll eventually get back to HTOP, but I still got 4 windows open. So if I close this window, close the next, close the next, close the next, you see I had 4 terminals open, but they were in this monocle mode, this full screen mode, where they were all full screen stacked on top of each other. One more mode we should discuss, let me open up a terminal again, is the floating mode. So I'm cycling through. I got a bunch of layouts here in Qtile for demonstration purposes, but this is a floating mode. As you can guess, I can grab the window with the mouse, or I could actually float it with the keyboard. There's also keyboard commands to float this window. I could resize the window as well. So this acts very much like traditional floating windows. Now, why would you want to have a floating window in a tiling window manager? Well, there are some programs that work better as floating windows. There are some windows that you just want to float. You don't want them to be forced into a tiling layout. For example, pop-up windows, notification windows. You don't want those things to be forced into your tiling layout. It just won't look right, and it'll just throw everything off. So typically what you're going to do is in your config files set rules for certain types of windows to always be floating. The final mode I want to discuss is the Fibonacci layout, sometimes called the spiral layout, and there's also a variation of the Fibonacci layout called the dwindle layout we should also discuss. So let me pull up my desktop here. So this is the awesome window manager, and I have already set up a spiral layout here for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to open up the first window, then the second window, then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth, then the sixth, seventh. You see how it spirals around, kind of like a snail's shell. This is the Fibonacci or the spiral layout. Now there is a variation on this layout again called the dwindle layout. And instead of spiraling around toward the center, the windows just dwindle toward the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. So again, I'll open up 7 windows and you'll see how it divides the screen, keeps dividing. My head is in the way here. Let me hide myself here and keep on. Well, keep on. We just keep dwindling away into nothingness here. So some final considerations that you want to consider before diving into tiling window managers, some things you may need. So again, these are window managers only. Because of that, some of them especially are very minimal. I can tell you right now, things like DWM and especially things like Xmonad are extremely minimal. There are going to be some other programs you want to install alongside the window managers before you ever get started. For one thing, you need a run launcher. You need some kind of command launcher. I strongly recommend dmenu. Rofi is also another good option. dmenu is great because a lot of these window managers, they kind of expect you to have dmenu on the system, so that's why I recommend dmenu. dmenu is a fantastic program. I've done a bunch of videos about dmenu as well in the past. You also need a terminal emulator. To do anything, to edit config files, to change anything on your system, you need a terminal. So if you're doing like a minimal Arch install or a minimal Gentoo install or whatever, and you're throwing Xmonad or i3 or whatever on it, make sure you install a terminal emulator, and I would choose something kind of common. Xterm or URXVT are both solid choices because a lot of these window managers expect you to have one or the other of those on the system, so I would choose one of those to get started with. You need a panel. Some of these tiling window managers come with a pre-built panel. DWM comes with a panel, Qtile comes with a panel, and Awesome comes with a panel. Things like Xmonad though, BSPWM, they do not come with a panel. You have to install a third-party panel. The one I recommend is Polybar. Polybar is a fantastic program. If you're doing Xmonad, the bar that everybody runs in Xmonad is Xmobar. It's a panel written in Haskell, which is the programming language that Xmonad is written in, and that bar was built to run with Xmonad. Even though they're two separate programs, you kind of need Xmobar if you're running Xmonad. The other thing you need is make sure you have a text editor that you are comfortable with on the system before you ever get started, because you're going to have to do some editing of these config files. That is, you can't get around that. You're going to have to spend some serious time editing a config file. So make sure Vim is probably installed on the system. On most Unix-based operating systems, VI or Vim is already installed. If you're comfortable in Vim, you're good. If you're not comfortable in Vim, install a different text editor before you ever get started. Make sure Nano is there in the shell, or maybe install a graphical text editor like gedit or Genie or something like that before you ever get started. Again, just to make your life a little easier. So let's dive into some of these window managers. So the first tiling window manager I want to discuss today is DWM. Now DWM is one of the oldest tiling window managers. It's very lightweight, very fast, very minimal. It's written in under 2,000 lines of code. It's written in C. Now, what makes DWM kind of famous or infamous in some people's opinion is the fact that because it has this strict 2,000 lines of code limit, it doesn't have very much functionality built into it by default. To get additional functionality, you have to go to the suckless.org website. The DWM is written by the Suckless guys, and you have to go grab these patches. There's a list of, I don't know, maybe 100 patches with extra functionality for DWM. They're basically diff files. You grab these diff files, you run a patch command in the terminal to patch DWM. You have to have the source code for DWM. You patch it, and then you recompile with a sudo make install. It's kind of complicated, to be honest. This is not a good first tiling window manager. I don't recommend this as a first tiling window manager. Now, DWM is a dynamic tiling window manager. That's what the name stands for, Dynamic Window Manager. Now, what makes these window managers, these tiling window managers, differ from each other, or whether they're dynamic or manual, DWM's dynamic. Also, how do they handle multi-monitors? So DWM has workspaces. Well, they actually have tags. These are called tags, not workspaces. So what exactly is a tag, and how does a tag differ from a workspace? Well, a tag it can be applied to a window. So if I open up a window, and you see right now I'm on this third workspace. Well, no, it's really the third tag. I can tag this window to this workspace. I'm going to keep conflating the two, but it's basically I can tag a window with multiple tags. I can have this window tag to the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh tag. That way, when I go to the seventh tag, that window will also be there. So that's how that differs from workspaces, your traditional workspaces. But it's pretty much like workspaces. Now, in my example here, I have 9 workspaces here in DWM. I have 9 workspaces on monitor 1, and then at the bottom of the screen you see my desktops for monitor 2 and monitor 3. They also have 9 workspaces. There's 9 workspaces on monitor 1, 9 workspaces on monitor 2, 9 workspaces on monitor 3. They are not the same set of 9 workspaces. Each monitor has its own set of 9 workspaces. They operate independently of each other, so technically I have 27 workspaces, not 9. Again, 9 on each monitor. Now this is different. Some other tiling window managers we're going to discuss later, their workspaces are all shared between the monitors, meaning if I had 9 workspaces, I have 9 workspaces shared between all 3 monitors. That's not the case with DWM. So if I have a set of 9 workspaces on monitor 1, how do I move it to monitor 2 or monitor 3, since those sets of 9 workspaces on monitor 2 are not the same workspaces as monitor 1? Well, you can move that window I have on monitor 1 to monitor 2 with a simple key combination. Now, it moves it to whatever workspace or tag is on monitor 2. Meaning, if I happen to be on workspace 1 on monitor 2, I just move that window to workspace 1. I happen to be on workspace 3, so that's where it moved the window. I can move it back to monitor 1. I have a key combination that'll do that. So you can move the windows around the 3 different monitors I have, but again, it's going to move it to the workspace that's currently sitting on that monitor at that time. And moving to the next tiling window manager we're going to discuss, Xmonad. Xmonad is another very old tiling window manager. It's been around for a number of years. Xmonad is very suckless in its philosophy, very similar to DWM. It's written in not a lot of lines of code. I want to say 5,000 lines of Haskell in this case rather than C. Xmonad is very minimal. By default, when you log into Xmonad for the first time, you're presented with a black screen. You have nothing that draws the wallpaper. You don't have a panel built in the way you had with DWM. You have to install a third-party panel. The one I'm using is Xmobar, a panel written in Haskell designed to be used with Xmonad. But Xmonad, again, is very much like DWM. The default layout in Xmonad is the traditional master and stack layout. Now, there are other layouts as well. If I wanted to, I could switch to a traditional grid layout. And, it just keeps dividing the screen into grids. I also have this 3-column layout where it divides the screen into 1/2, and then it does the columns kind of in a master and stack layout. And then I have a 3-row layout, which is, it divides the screen into rows. And then if I wanted to, I could change to this layout, which I've named one big. It's got one big window and then a smaller stack of windows on the other side. Then I've got a monocle layout. This is Xmonad's full screen layout. This is a space layout. I'm not sure what this is. And this is a floating layout. This is, of course, the windows float. Now, let's take a look at the configuration file for Xmonad. I'm going to open up my xmonad.hs file. Let's get back to a tiling layout here. So I'm going to go back to the master and stack layout here, and let's see if I can zoom in so you guys can read the configuration here. So this is Xmonad's config. It's written entirely in Haskell. Because it's written entirely in Haskell, Xmonad, and also because it's so ultra minimal out of the box, Xmonad's probably the most difficult of the tiling window managers I'm discussing today to get into. I wouldn't recommend it as a beginner. This shouldn't be your first tiling window manager. Very much like DWM shouldn't be your first tiling window manager, Xmonad is the same. It's a fantastic window manager, probably my favorite tiling window manager, Xmonad, but a little difficult because of the programming language it's written in. Haskell is not easy and most people don't know it. So anyway, just reading a little bit of the Haskell help you guys out. If this is your first time looking at a config, you're importing various Haskell libraries here at the top of the config, and then you're setting variables, you're setting your mod key, which is either the super key or the alt key. That's the key that's used in most of your key bindings. You're setting your default terminal, you're setting your default text editor, or at least I am. I'm setting the default border width around the windows, and then here I'm launching Xmobar on 3 different monitors is what this is doing. So if I show you, this is what's going on 3 monitors right now. So if I wanted to, I could send this to monitor 1, monitor 2. So by default, Xmonad handles multi-monitors in a very different way than DWM. DWM, you had a set of workspaces on monitor 1 and a different set of workspaces on monitor 2 and a third set of workspaces on monitor 3. Xmonad does this completely differently. You have a set of workspaces. Those workspaces are shared across all the monitors. So I have a set of 9 workspaces, but they are shared amongst the monitors. For example, if I open up a terminal on workspace 1, which right now workspace 1 is sitting on monitor 1, it opens as you would expect. Now I'm going to open a different program on workspace 2, which is on monitor 2. I'll launch HTOP there. As a matter of fact, to make things clear, I'll go ahead and launch Awesome Mixer on workspace 1. And then, you know what, I'll open up something on monitor 3 as well. I'll just run a quick ls command just so we have different things on each monitor. So workspace 1 is on monitor 1. Workspace 2 is on monitor 2. Workspace 3 is on monitor 3. Workspaces 4 through 9 are not being used right now. All right, so let me show you how you swap workspaces in Xmonad. So if I'm on the first workspace on the first monitor and I hit Super 2 to go to the second workspace, watch what happens. The second workspace and the first workspace switch places. They swap places. Now, workspace 2 is actually on monitor 1. Workspace 1 is actually on monitor 2. If I wanted to, I could go back. So that is very different. If I wanted to, I could switch from workspace 1 to workspace 3 and swap places with that. So the fact that these workspaces swap places with each other, a lot of people find that very confusing when you first come to it, but trust me, once you get used to this, you wonder why every window manager doesn't do this. It makes total sense. I prefer this, actually. I think this is the smart way to do multi-monitors. The next tiling window manager we should discuss is Qtile. Qtile is almost exactly like Xmonad as far as the look and feel of it. It is almost a direct clone of Xmonad in many ways. The difference is, rather than being written in Haskell, Qtile is written in Python. So if I opened up the Qtile config file, and zoom in here so you guys can see what's going on, you will notice that this is much easier to read. If you know any programming, you probably know a little bit of Python. Again, Haskell, not too many people know Haskell. So this is a little easier to write your own config and customize your own config. Just reading a little bit of the config, you're importing some Python libraries. Going down a little further, these sections here are setting up your key bindings, such as mod J, which is the current window in the stack. So if I opened up a second window, mod J changes which window has focus. Mod K does the same thing in the reverse direction. Now it's the same direction because we only have 2 windows open, but if I had 3 or more windows open, you would see J goes one direction, K goes the other. Close those windows. I mentioned it's very much like Xmonad, so you will notice that the default layout, which they call Monad Tall in Qtile, so they're even giving deference to the Xmonad project there. The default layout is the master and stack layout. Now, if I hit Super and Tab, I can cycle through some other layouts that are available. There's Monad Wide. There is a BSP layout. There's one called Tree Tab, which is kind of interesting. There's the GIMP layout. This is used when I use GIMP. It's basically a floating layout just for GIMP. Then I have a actual floating layout, and then the max or full screen or monocle layout. So how does Qtile handle multi-monitors? It handles it exactly just like Xmonad. So I have a set of 8 workspaces here in Qtile, and I have workspace 1 sitting on monitor 1. I have HTOP running. I have workspace 2 sitting on monitor 2 right now, and I have just a terminal where I ran the ls command. Then I have workspace 3 sitting on monitor 3. I've got Awesome Mixer up on that. And then workspaces 4 through 8 are not being used. Now, if I want to, I can switch workspace 1, which is sitting on monitor 1, to workspace 5, for example. And that takes me to workspace 5, which doesn't have anything open on it, but I want to go back to workspace 1, so I'll go back to workspace 1. But watch what happens when I want to go to workspace 2 from workspace 1. Workspace 2 is already on monitor 2. Watch how they swap places. So it swaps places with any workspaces that are currently seen on one of my other monitors. If I go back to workspace 1, you'll see they'll swap places again. If I swap workspace 1 with workspace 3, you'll see Awesome Mixer and workspace 3 are now on monitor 1. Workspace 1 is actually now on monitor 3, where you see HTOP running. And if I hit Super 1, I'll go back to workspace 1 on monitor 1, and workspace 3 goes back to monitor 3. Again, I know that's confusing, but once you get used to this, this is a fantastic way of handling multi-monitors. By the way, Qtile, as I'm sure you've already figured out, is a dynamic tiling window manager because it has the pre-built layouts, such as the master and stack layout, which was the same as Xmonad and the same as DWM. All 3 of those window managers are what we call dynamic tiling window managers. The 4th tiling window manager I want to cover is the Awesome window manager. Awesome, judging by the name, is awesome. It is just a fantastic window manager. It's probably the easiest tiling window manager to get into for the new user because it is very easy as far as it comes with a panel. The panel's really configurable, has a ton of widgets. It also has a right-click menu. If you right-click the desktop, you have all your programs here in a almost open box right-click menu. Of course, being a tiling window manager, you're not going to see much of the desktop because the minute you open up a single program, your desktop is full. So that right-click menu, you're probably never going to use it. That's the first time I've actually launched that thing in weeks, using Awesome Window Manager. So it's not something you will use, but it's nice that it's there for the very first time you log into Awesome. You're used to floating window managers and you're not sure what to do. It's kind of nice that they have that menu there just in case you need it. But for the most part, Awesome Window Manager functions exactly like DWM because Awesome is a fork of DWM. So what makes Awesome different than DWM? Well, I mentioned it's a little easier. It has that menu. The panel is much nicer. It's not as lightweight and minimal as DWM. DWM is so minimal that you have to patch it, and patch it a lot to make it usable. Awesome is ready to go. It works out of the box. And it comes with a bunch of predefined layouts by default. The default layout, as you can imagine, since it's based off of DWM, is the master and stack layout. But there's a million other layouts here in Awesome. I have the floating layout, and that's one called tile left. It's a master and stack, except the stack is reversed. There is another kind of master and stack layout, but a more horizontal master and stack layout. And there's another one, and that is the spiral layout. That's the dwindle layout. That's the full screen layout. That's one called magnifier, where you have one screen always front and center. And then, of course, the traditional master and stack layout. Like DWM, the workspaces in Awesome are not workspaces. They are tags. Again, very similar to DWM. So if I open up my Awesome config, which is the rc.lua file, I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see what I'm doing here, and I'm going to scroll down. By the way, Awesome is written in Lua, the Lua scripting language, and I'm going to find some of the key bindings related to tagging. So dynamic tagging, it looks like mod key control renames a tag. So if I did mod key control R, I could rename the current tag. Right now it's named dev. I could name it. No, just rename it name. You see how I renamed that tag? If I wanted to, it looks like I could move the current tag in the order. So I could move it over to the left. How about all the way? We'll make it all the way to like workspace 8 now instead of workspace 1. So you can rename the tags, you can move the tags, also the windows. I mentioned you can pin them or tag them to multiple tags. How do you do that? Well, it looks like mod key plus control plus the number of the workspace or tag. So if I do mod control and 1, I highlight the first tag. Mod control 2 highlights the second tag. I'm going to highlight all the tags. And then mod key plus control plus shift, and then I think enter. Or is it? No, it's the numbers themselves. Well, actually, pin this window. This window is now pinned to all 8 workspaces. So that is how we basically use tags. That's how tags are useful. So now I'm on workspace 1 or tag 1. When I change to workspace 2, this window's there. Workspace 3, this window's there. Workspace 4, etc., etc. How does Awesome Window Manager handle multi-monitors? It does it the exact same way as DWM. I have a set of 8 workspaces on monitor 1, a different set of 8 workspaces on monitor 2, and yet a different set of 8 workspaces on monitor 3. They act independently of each other, so if I open up a window on workspace 1 on monitor 1, and I open up a second window on workspace 1 monitor 2, that's not the same workspace 1. Workspace 1 on monitor 1 is not the same workspace 1 as on monitor 2. Now, you can move windows between the different desktops. If I wanted to, I could hit the super key and drag it with the mouse over to the next monitor and drag it back, or there is a key combination, mod O, would move it to the next monitor, and if I keep hitting mod O, it'll move it to the next monitor in the stack and to the next monitor, and then super shift C to close that window, super shift C to close that window. So the next window manager I want to discuss is i3. i3 is a very popular tiling window manager, maybe the most popular one right now. It seems to be the one everybody's on. It's the meme. Everybody wants to run Arch Linux with i3. i3 is a fine tiling window manager. It is not dynamic really, although on their website i3 calls itself a dynamic window manager, but it's really more of a manual tiler, and I prefer dynamic tilers, but manual tilers are not bad either. So by manual, it means, the default layout, it does have this pre-built layout, but it's just this columned layout, which nobody would ever use. To do a manual tiling, though, what you would do is you use the mod key, the super key, and either V for vertical or Z for horizontal. So if I do V, mod V, and then open up a new window, it splits the screen vertically. If I do mod Z and then hit enter, it splits that frame horizontally. If I hit mod Z again, it would again split that frame horizontally. I will super shift C to close all these windows. By the way, the panel is Polybar, so I'm using a third-party panel here with i3. You will notice I'm recording the middle of my 3 monitors, which is on workspace 2, Workspace 1 is on monitor 1, Workspace 3 is on monitor 3, Workspace 2 is the one I'm recording on monitor 2, and I have up to 9 workspaces configured here in my i3 config, but you never see all 9 in the taskbar. Why is that? It's because i3 is a little weird in that these workspaces, even though I've configured it to use up to 9, those workspaces don't actually exist until I actually go to them. So if I hit Super and 8 right now, I'll go to Workspace 8. You see it changes. Workspace 2 is no longer on the bar on any panel because Workspace 2 doesn't exist. Now, if I had had something opened on Workspace 2, I'd still see it. For example, let me open something here on Workspace 8. Then I'm going to mod 2 to go back to Workspace 2. And now I have both 2 and 8 in the panel because 8 has something on it. So it still exists. But if I go back to 8, and Super Shift C to close that window and go back mod 2 to Workspace 2, Workspace 8 disappears, right? It no longer exists. So that's a little bit different than all the other tiling window managers I've shown you today. One of the claims to fame with the i3 window manager is some of the pre-built layouts. Now, I mentioned it's a manual tiler. You can decide on the fly where windows appear, but it does have a couple of pre-built layouts that seem to be popular with i3 fans. So let me open up some windows. I'll open up HTOP, and then I'll open up another terminal. I'll just LS for that one. And then, I'll open up a third terminal, and I'll just leave it blank. So I have 3 windows open. Now, if I do Mod S, this puts us into what is called a stacking layout. So you can see I have the window open, and then above it, I have 3 title bars that are stacked at the top. So this is telling you the order of the windows. I have HTOP, and then I have that one, which is just a LS, and then that one, which is just an empty terminal. That is a stacking layout. Now, if I hit Mod W, we go into what is called a tabbed layout. So instead of having all that wasted space with the stacking of the title bars, now we have them in a kind of horizontal tabbed layout. We have HTOP, and then we have the LS terminal, and then we have the empty terminal. So that is probably the most popular layout actually in i3 is this tabbed layout, which is, I admit, it's kind of neat. I'm kind of a traditionalist. I prefer the old school master and stack layout, which i3 doesn't have a master and stack layout by default, but you could configure one. By the way, we should take a look at the i3 config. So let me open up my i3 config so you guys can see what it looks like. It's actually very simple. The i3 documentation is really good, and configuring i3 is not that bad because the i3 config resembles pretty much shell scripting for the most part. i3 has its own simple syntax for its config file. It's pretty easy to write an i3 config. It's definitely a lot easier to configure i3 than it is, the more difficult tiling window managers like DWM and Xmonad. i3 is very easy, probably one of the easier ones to get into alongside Qtile and alongside Awesome. All 3 of those would be good first-time tiling window managers. So let's talk about i3 and multi-monitors. Now on my i3 config, I have 8 or 9 workspaces I think configured for this, but again, those workspaces are only being used if they're currently shown on one of my monitors or they have a window open. So right now, I only have 4 workspaces because I have monitor 1 on workspace 1, monitor 2 has workspace 2, monitor 3 has workspace 3, and I have a 4th workspace that I have some stuff sitting open on. OBS right now is recording this. So even though I have my config file saying I have 8 workspaces, I really only have 4 until I go to those workspaces and put something on them. So on workspace 1, on monitor 1, let's open up HTOP. So that is HTOP. Now if I super shift 2, I will send HTOP to workspace 2, which is on monitor 2. If I super shift 3, I will send HTOP to workspace 3, which is on monitor 3. If I super shift 5 right now, I'll send HTOP to workspace 5. Now workspace 5 is on monitor 3. If I super shift 3, I'll go back to workspace 3 on monitor 3. Workspace 1 is on monitor 1. Super shift C to close that window. The 6th window manager I want to show you is Herbstluft WM. It's the tiling window manager with a funny name. So Herbstluft stands for, or is German for Autumn Air. So this is the Autumn Air window manager. Herbstlift is a manual tiler, so how a manual tiler again works. So I open up a window, and then if I want to open up a window to the right of that window, I mod O, and it shows me that workspace. Mod L for me to highlight that workspace, to move left, and then hit enter to open up the window there. That's kind of convoluted. If I mod U, it'll create a new kind of area up under that window, and then mod J to move down to highlight that area, and then mod enter in this case just to open a terminal. I'm just opening terminals today. And that is how you handle the manual tiling aspect of Herbstlift. Now I think mod R would remove that created empty area here. So if I mod R, it removes that. So Super Shift C will close HTOP, but it doesn't remove that area that we created. So mod R removes that area. Super Shift C, of course, removes the first window. I can't remove this area here because that's the beginning. That's where we started. Now the default layout in Herbstlift is just one of these row layouts. It's not very useful. So you'd probably want to use the manual tiling aspect of Herbstlift, or you'd probably want to create some custom layouts yourself. We should take a look at the config for Herbstlift. So if I open up my config and zoom in, now this is in fact a shell script. That is how you configure Herbstlift. It is just your typical bash script. It's very easy. The syntax is very easy to understand. It's very easy to modify. The panel I'm using here in Herbstlift, again, just like in i3, I'm using Polybar for my panel. So how does Herbstlift handle multi-monitors? Well, first of all, workspaces. Kind of like Qtile and Xmonad, Herbstlift has one set of workspaces shared across all three monitors. I have Herbstlift set up to use 9 workspaces. Those 9 workspaces, again, are shared across all 3 monitors rather than having a set of workspaces for each monitor the way DWM and Awesome did. Right now I have my Herbstlift config opened on Workspace 2. Workspace 2 is currently on Monitor 2. Now if I hit Super Shift 1, I will send this document to Workspace 1. Workspace 1 is currently on Monitor 1, so it sent it to Monitor 1. Now if I focus that window again and Super Shift 2, I will send it back to Workspace 2, which Workspace 2 is currently sitting on Monitor 2. If I focus on that window again and Super Shift 3, I will send it to Workspace 3, which is currently on Monitor 3. If I Super Shift, I don't know, how about Super Shift 6? We'll send it to Workspace 6. Now Workspace 6 is not even viewable because, again, I was only using the first 3 workspaces on my monitors, but if I Super 6, I will go to the 6th workspace, and there is that document. I'm going to send it back to the 3rd workspace, so Super Shift 3 sends it back to the 3rd workspace, which is not viewable because Monitor 3 right now is on Workspace 6. I have to Super 3 to get back to Workspace 3. If I Super Shift 1, I will send this document back to Workspace 1 on the 1st monitor. The 7th and final window manager I want to talk about is BSPWM. BSPWM stands for Binary Space Partitioning Window Manager. Binary Space Partitioning, as you can tell, it's probably a tree-based tiling window manager. It's based, you think of the windows as leaves of a binary tree. Space partitioning, it's kind of a manual tiler. You decide on the fly whether you want the next window to tile vertically or horizontally, so it's a manual tiler. Now by default, this is my BSPWM here, so I haven't configured it that much, but the default layout, if I just start opening windows, and let me remove my head so you guys can see the pattern that's going to unfold here. Does that pattern look familiar? Yes, that is the dwindle pattern. So that is the default BSPWM layout. So I like the way BSPWM handles manual tiling. So if I open up a terminal right now with just super enter, if I do super control and then the Vim keys, HJKL, so that is H is left, J is down, K is up, L is right, the Vim keys. So if I do super control L for right, you see I get that area. Now if I just launch a window, it appears in that area. If I super control J for down, again, it splits that down, and I can open up something in that space. If I super control H for right, I open up that. Super Shift C is what I've got to close the window. So the way you manually create these windows, or these spaces for these windows, is actually really nice. The Vim keys plus super control, that's very easy to hit on the keyboard. So I really like some of the default layouts for BSPWM compared to the defaults in Herbstluft and i3. Now let's take a look at the BSPWM config. Now this is interesting because you have two config files really for BSPWM. So let me first open up my BSPWM RC file. Now you would think this is the config file for BSPWM, but honestly, you're not going to play with this much. The only thing you do in this file is launch what you want to launch on auto start. By default, I launch Nitrogen to restore the wallpaper. I launch my panel, which again is Polybar. I'm using Polybar in BSPWM. I'm launching Compton, which is the compositor, which gives me, transparency and nice effects like that. And then I launch this program here called SXHKD, the Simple X Hotkey Daemon. What is that about? Well, that is your hotkeys that control your window manager. So this BSPWM RC file is a config, but it doesn't contain any key bindings. All your key bindings are actually in a separate file, and that is the SXHKD RC file. So the only thing I configure in this is my monitors. So BSPWM, how does it handle triple monitors? Well, first of all, you have to identify each of your three monitors. So you see I have BSP-C monitor, DisplayPort 0, DisplayPort 1, HDMI A0. That's the name of my three monitors. How do you get the name? Well, you use a tool like XRander or ARander to get the names of your monitors. So let me show you that. I'll open up a terminal and type X, R and R. When I open that, it tells me that I have three monitors, and here are their names: DisplayPort 0, DisplayPort 1, and HDMI A0. So that is why these are named the way they are in the config file. The thing about BSPWM is you have a set of workspaces on each monitor, kind of like you do with Awesome and DWM, except here's the thing. You can't have workspaces like 0 through 9 on monitor 1, and 0 through 9 on monitor 2, and 0 through 9 on monitor 3, the way you can in DWM and Awesome. No, basically you have 1 through 3 on monitor 1, at least in my case, 4 through 6 on monitor 2, and 7 through 9 on monitor 3. I can't have the same numbered workspace on different monitors. At least I don't think I can. I've looked through the documentation. I've never been able to figure this out, but that's fine. Having three different workspaces on each of my three monitors is enough workspaces for me. Now the real config though is not this BSPWM RC file, so let me close that. The real config that contains all the hotkeys is the Simple X Hotkey Daemon RC file, the SXHKD RC file. So I'm going to zoom into that so we can see it, and this is all the key bindings for BSPWM. So this, again, very simple syntax, similar to Herbstluft, and similar to i3. The syntax is super easy to read. That's basically kind of like a script. For example, just reading this script, you can see super plus shift plus C runs this command, BSP-C node-C, which basically closes a window. So super shift C closes a window. Super plus M, what does that do? Well, that alternates between tiled and monocle layout. So let me open up a window. So I'm in tiled layout. Super M, though, should put me in monocle layout. So right now I'm in monocle layout. How does BSPWM handle multi-monitors and workspaces? Well, again, I have three different workspaces on each of my three monitors. I have workspace 1 through 3 on monitor 1, workspaces 4 through 6 on monitor 2, workspaces 7 through 9 on monitor 3. So I'm going to open up a window on workspace 1 on monitor 1. I'll open up HTOP. Now if I send it to workspace 2, I'll send it to workspace 2, which is hidden. Workspace 2, though, is assigned to monitor 1. So Super 2 takes me to Workspace 2. I'm going to send it back to Workspace 1, which currently doesn't have focus, but if I Super 1, I'll go back to Workspace 1 where HTOP is still there. Now if I Super Shift 4, I will send this to Workspace 4. Workspace 4 was actually sitting on monitor 2, so that's where it went. If I Super Shift 7, I will send it to Workspace 7, which was currently sitting on monitor 3. Now let me open up a second window on monitor 1. So this is Workspace 1 on monitor 1. Now if I send it to Workspace 7, it just goes to Workspace 7. Nothing happens. If I give it focus and send it back to Workspace 1, it just goes back to Workspace 1. I'll give focus to HTOP, Super Shift 1, sends it back to Workspace 1, Super Shift C to close, Super Shift C to close. So that was a quick look at 7 tiling window managers that I've used. I've lived in all of those tiling window managers before for at least a month. Some of them I've lived in for a long time. I've been a long time user of Xmonad, and one of my favorite window managers. I've also had extensive experience with Awesome and with Qtile. Haven't spent that much time with i3, Herbstluft, or BSPWM, but all fine window managers. The reason I haven't spent that much time with them is they're more of a manual tiling window manager than a dynamic, and I prefer dynamic. DWM, also I haven't spent that much time with DWM, but I like DWM. The only reason I haven't spent that much time with DWM is because I got tired of recompiling. But it is a great tiling window manager. All 7 of these are great tiling window managers. If I was a new user, though, I would strongly recommend you start with the Awesome window manager. As you get more experience with tiling window managers, then maybe branch out into things like Qtile, i3, BSPWM, Herbstluft, and then if you're really experienced, then check out DWM and Xmonad. Before I go, I need to thank a few special people. This show was made possible by Ansem, First Chris, Second Chris, DJ, Dylan, George, Mitchell, Natek, Philip, Rob, Robert, Sam, and Willie. They are the producers of the show. Without those guys, this comprehensive guide to tiling window managers, it wouldn't be possible. I also want to thank all those other names you see on the screen. Those are the supporters of this channel. All those guys help support me over on Patreon. If you like this content and you'd like to support this channel, please consider doing so. You'll find me at DistroTube over on Patreon. All right, guys. Peace.